Welcome to Hope Talks, where we share healing options for personal excellence. I'm Alivia B,
And I'm Quincy T.
and we're so glad you're here. Today's episode is all about binge watching.
One of my favorite ways to watch a good show.
Ever just lose yourself in a storyline?
Of course.
Like you can't stop, can't look away. It's got to be a pretty universal thing, right?
Yeah, I think most people have been there.
Okay, so get this. Back in 2017, a whopping 73% of Americans said they were binge watchers.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and guess what? Fast forward to 2024, even with like TikTok and games and everything fighting for our attention, that number's still hovering around 70%.
Seriously.
Seriously. And here's the kicker. You'd think it'd be teenagers, right? Leading the pack.
Yeah, that's what I would thought.
But nope. It's actually the 30 to 44-year-olds who are most likely to settle in for a good old-fashioned TV marathon.
That's kind of surprising.
Right. It really makes you think about how ingrained this whole binge-watching thing has become.
Yeah, it's definitely not just a passing fad. It's a major part of how we're spending our free time these days.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that those numbers have stayed so consistent, even with all the changes in the media landscape, really says something.
Totally. So for this deep dive, we are going deep into binge watching. We've got a bunch of articles that cover like everything. Where this whole trend started, what it's doing to our brains, its impact on society, the whole shebang.
That's fascinating.
It is. And we want to unpack all of it for you.
Okay.
Why do we have this urge to just keep watching? What are the real pros and cons? And what's actually happening in our brains when we just can't resist hitting that next episode button?
All good questions.
Right. Let's start with like the origins of binge watching.
Okay.
I mean, watching a bunch of episodes in a row isn't exactly a new thing, but the way we do it now with streaming has definitely changed things.
Yeah, that's true. The experience is totally different now.
Right. So the term binge watch itself actually popped up around 2003.
Huh. I didn't realize it went back that far.
Yeah. But the real game changer, the thing that really launched this whole era of streaming fueled binging, was back in 2013. Remember when Netflix dropped all 13 episodes of House of Cards at once?
Yeah, I remember that. It was a huge deal.
It was. That was a big move away from the traditional weekly release schedule.
It was a bold move.
Yeah.
And it definitely changed the game for everyone. Not just Netflix, but for viewers too. It really changed how we think about watching TV.
Exactly. And it totally caught on. By 2015, binge watch was actually declared the word of the year by the Collins English Dictionary. And its usage had like skyrocketed up by a whopping 200%. Then, when the pandemic hit in 2020, things really went into overdrive. HBO, for example, saw a 65% increase in people watching 3 or more episodes back to back right when those stay-at-home orders started rolling out.
Yeah. It makes sense, though. When you're stuck at home, feeling isolated and stressed, there's something really comforting about escaping into a long, immersive story.
Absolutely. It provides a sense of continuity, right? Like a temporary break from all the chaos.
Yeah, like a little world you can control when everything else feels out of control.
Exactly. But, and this is where things get interesting lately, some streaming platforms have actually started going back to releasing episodes weekly, the way it used to be.
Yeah. And they're even calling it stinge watching, releasing episodes one by one.
I know. It's funny, right? And it's causing a lot of buzz, both good and bad. Some people love it. Some people hate it.
It makes you wonder, what do viewers really want? Is it the instant gratification of having a whole season to devour? Or is it the anticipation and buildup that comes with waiting for each episode?
Yeah.
I mean, stinge watching, it's all about bringing back that week-to-week discussion, that excitement for what's coming next. It's a completely different dynamic than just diving in and binging the whole thing.
Totally different experience. All right, so let's talk about some of the potential upsides of binge watching. It's not all just about zoning out on the couch, It might actually have some benefits, like, for instance, it can actually be good for your social life.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, think about it. When a big show drops and everyone's watching it, it creates this, like, shared cultural space. It gives people something to talk about. You can connect with friends, coworkers, even strangers over this shared experience.
Yeah, that's true. It's like a common ground, a way to break the ice and find something to connect over.
Exactly. And it can even be good for relationships. Like imagine couples watching together, laughing together, no distractions. That quality time can really strengthen their bond. There was even a study in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships that suggested it can be especially beneficial for long distance relationships. It gives them something to share, something to connect over, even when they're miles apart.
Yeah, it's like having a virtual date night, sharing those reactions and emotions in real time.
And here's another thing that might surprise you.
Okay.
There was a study in 2024 that found that binge watching isn't always this impulsive, out of control behavior.
Really?
Yeah, turns out a lot of people actually plan their binge watching session.
Interesting.
Right. And often they do it with friends. So it's more of a deliberate social thing than a sign of weak willpower.
That challenges the stereotype, doesn't it? It's not just mindless consumption. It can be a conscious choice to connect with others.
Totally. And another unexpected benefit, stress relief.
Okay, I'm listening.
So when we get really absorbed in a show, our brains release dopamine, that feel good chemical.
Yeah, the pleasure and reward chemical.
Exactly. And that can help us unwind, forget about our worries for a while. John Mayer, he's a clinical psychologist. He even described it as a steel door, like you can shut out all the stress and pressure of everyday life.
That's a great analogy, just shutting the door on all your worries and escaping into a different world.
Exactly. And some people are even getting creative and combining binge watching with exercise.
Oh, how does that work?
Well, they use it as motivation. Like they only let themselves watch their favorite show while they're working out. One professor even said he bought a rowing machine just for this purpose.
That's dedication.
Yeah, and it works. He said the cliffhangers actually make him look forward to his next workout.
That's brilliant. It's like turning something potentially unhealthy into a tool for positive change.
Right. And then there's the argument that binge watching can actually make us appreciate a show more.
How so?
You know that feeling of total immersion? Like when you stay up all night to finish a really good book? It's like that. Especially with shows that are designed for binging. They often have these intricate storylines, complex characters, and you can really get a better grasp of it all when you watch multiple episodes in a row.
That makes sense. You get to stay in that world with those characters for an extended period. It allows for a deeper connection, a richer understanding of the story.
Exactly. And a psychologist named Tara Whitmore even suggests that binge watchers might develop more empathy because they're constantly exposed to these complex characters dealing with all sorts of emotions. It's like an emotional workout, she says, which could potentially make us more understanding and compassionate in our real lives.
Wow, that's a really interesting perspective. So it's not just passive entertainment. It could actually be shaping how we relate to others in the real world.
Right. And a historian, Darius von Guttner Sporzinski, he makes a really intriguing point. He says this desire to binge, to really get lost in a story, it's not new at all.
Really?
Yeah, he says it's a fundamental human thing, It's like those ancient storytelling traditions or those serialized novels people used to devour. We've always been drawn to immersive stories. And he thinks the guilt we sometimes feel about binging, it's more about our current societal values around leisure time than anything inherently wrong with the activity itself.
That's a really thought-provoking point.
Yeah,
It makes you reconsider those assumptions about what's productive or unproductive when it comes to how we spend our free time.
totally. Okay, so we've talked about some of the potential upsides, but let's be real, there are some downsides too, especially when it comes to mental health.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Right. Studies have linked excessive binge watching to things like depression and loneliness. Like, there's a study from the University of Texas, and they found that people who reported binge watching a lot were more likely to feel depressed, lonely, and even less in control of their own behavior.
Wow, that's concerning.
Yeah. And one of the researchers even pointed out that when it becomes excessive, it can lead people to neglect important things in their lives, like their work or their relationships. It's like they're withdrawing from the real world.
Makes sense. It's like any form of escapism. If it becomes your primary coping mechanism, it can start to have negative consequences.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of digital addiction.
Right. That's a growing concern.
Yeah. Renee Carr, she's a clinical psychologist.
Yeah.
She explains that the same neural pathways in our brain that get activated by substance abuse and other addictions, those same pathways also get triggered by binge watching. And that's because of the dopamine, right? It creates this craving, this need for that constant stream of pleasure.
So essentially, our brains can become addicted to the feeling of binge watching, just like they can become addicted to substances or certain behaviors.
Exactly. And it's not just about feeling like you've wasted time. Some studies show that people can actually experience a sort of mourning after a binge.
Mourning? Like grieving?
Yeah, sort of like a post-binge letdown. Feelings of depression, anxiety, a sense of emptiness. There was even a researcher, Mary Carmen Vizcaino, who found that binge watchers reported feeling more stressed after watching, not less, which is like the opposite of what most people are going for.
That's so interesting. So It might provide a temporary escape, but in the long run, it could actually be making things worse.
Right. And then there's the physical health side of things, which is a whole other can of worms.
Right, sitting for hours on end can't be good for you.
No, definitely not. It's linked to all sorts of issues: slow metabolism, increased risk of heart disease, certain types of cancer, even blood clots. And of course, there's the whole thing about binge watching and unhealthy eating habits.
Oh, yeah. Snacking while watching TV is practically a national pastime.
Right. It's so easy to mindlessly munch on chips or cookies when you're caught up in a show. And then there's the sleep connection. Studies have found links between binge watching and poor sleep quality, fatigue, insomnia. When you're all wired from those exciting storylines right before bed, it messes with your sleep. And there was even a study that found that watching 3 or more hours of TV a day was linked to a higher risk of dying prematurely.
That's a scary thought.
Right. And another study found that people who spend a lot of time in front of screens tend to have less healthy diets, more fast food, more eating in front of the TV, even higher levels of stress. So it's all connected, the physical and mental health aspect.
Absolutely, it's all intertwined.
And here's a weird thing. While we might think that binge watching makes us enjoy shows more, some research actually suggests the opposite.
Really?
Yeah. Like one study found that people who binge watch actually report less satisfaction and enjoyment than those who watch weekly.
That's surprising.
Right. It seems like the anticipation, that space between episodes, actually makes the experience more rewarding.
Maybe it allows you to savor it more, to process what you've seen and build up excitement for what's coming next.
Yeah, that makes sense. Damon Lindelof, he's the guy who co-created shows like Lost. He talked about how binge culture has kind of killed that Christmas morning feeling of anticipation. And apparently releasing whole seasons at once can actually hurt a show in the long run.
How so?
Well, it reduces the amount of discussion and buzz that happens week to week. It makes it harder for a dedicated fan base to grow organically.
Yeah, I can see that. When everyone watches at their own pace, it's harder to have those shared moments of excitement and speculation.
Exactly. And then there's the spoiler problem. When a whole season drops at once, social media becomes a minefield. It can be really frustrating for people who can't binge right away. And it can even create divisions within the fandom, like arguments about when it's okay to discuss certain plot points.
Yeah, I definitely see those kinds of debates online.
Yeah,
There's this pressure to watch immediately so you don't get spoiled.
right. And this TV critic, Philip Masiak, he made a really interesting point about shows that were originally designed for weekly release, like Scandal. He said that when you binge watch them, it can actually be a really disorienting experience
Disorienting. How so?
because the pacing, the cliffhangers, all of that was designed for weekly viewing. It was meant to keep you on the edge of your seat, waiting for the next episode. And when you take that away, it can kind of lose its impact.
That's fascinating. Like the form of release actually shapes the experience of the content itself.
Right. There's this journalist, Flora Watkins, and she described the feeling really well. She talked about the euphoric highs of binge watching, followed by this inevitable come down, like you feel kind of sluggish and blah afterwards. And she contrasted that with the experience of watching a show weekly, like Slow Horses. She said it allowed for more anticipation and discussion, and it felt more satisfying overall.
So it's like a slow burn versus a sugar rush. Both have their appeal, but the slow burn might be more sustainable in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And then there's Alex Welch. He's a media journalist. And he argues that even hugely popular shows like Stranger Things and The Bear might have a shorter cultural lifespan because of the binge model. Like, he uses the example of this really powerful episode of The Bear and wonders if it would have had a more profound impact if people had to wait a week to process it.
Makes you think, right? That time and space between episodes allows for reflection, for those water cooler conversations, for the meeting to really sink in.
Yeah, exactly. And finally, Jade King, she writes for The Gamer, she talks about how this whole binge culture has created this expectation of instant gratification. Like, we want everything now, and that can actually hurt a show's development.
How so?
Well, she uses Fallout as an example, saying that because it was released all at once, there wasn't much room for speculation, for theories, for that week to week buildup that used to be such a big part of the TV experience.
So it's like we've traded anticipation and communal engagement for instant access, and maybe we've lost something valuable in the process.
Right. So we've seen the highs and lows, the good and the bad. Now let's try to understand why we do it. What's the psychology behind this whole binge watching thing?
Okay, let's dive in.
So remember dopamine.
Yeah, the pleasure chemical.
Well, that's a big part of it. It creates this feeling of reward. which makes it really hard to stop watching once you've started. Your brain is basically getting a hit of pleasure every time you click next episode.
It's like a positive reinforcement loop. The more you watch, the more dopamine you get, and the more you want to keep watching.
Exactly. And then there's the whole thing about cognitive engagement. Once we get hooked on a story, our brains naturally want closure. We need to know what happens next, how it all ends. It's like this built in need for completion that keeps us going.
It's like a puzzle you have to solve. You just can't rest until you have all the pieces in place.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the social aspect. Sharing those viewing experiences, whether it's with friends in person or online communities, it adds another layer of enjoyment. It's not just about the show itself, it's about being part of something bigger.
It's that sense of belonging, of shared experience that can be really powerful.
Totally. And it's interesting to think about all of this in the context of learning. Like in adult education, we talk about things like micro learning, breaking information down into bite sized chunks. And that's kind of like how TV shows are structured, right? With those easily digestible episodes. And then there's gamification, using rewards and points to motivate people. That taps into that same dopamine driven pleasure response we see with binge watching.
Right? And interactive storytelling, that's all about engaging the audience, giving them choices, and letting them shape the narrative. And that's kind of similar to how we get invested in TV characters and storylines, right?
Exactly. And then there's collaborative learning, which is all about the power of shared experience. And that's what we see with binge watching communities, those online discussions and fan theories. People are learning and engaging with each other through these shared experiences.
It's amazing how those same psychological principles that drive binge watching also apply to how we learn and engage with the world around us.
Right. So to sum it all up, binge watching is super common and it can have some benefits like fostering social connections and providing a temporary escape from stress.
Yeah, those are real benefits that shouldn't be dismissed.
But there are also some very real risks. It can negatively impact our mental and physical health, and it might even make us enjoy the shows less in the long run. And it all comes down to our brain's reward system, our need for closure, and our desire to connect with others.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
For sure. So, for those of you listening, think about your own binge watching habits. Have you experienced any of the pros or cons we talked about? How do you find that balance between entertainment and well being?
It's an ongoing challenge for all of us in this digital age. It's about being mindful and making conscious choices about how we consume media.
Totally. And if you want to explore this further, we're actually doing a deep dive soon on the impact of screen time on mental health. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye out for it. It delves into some related topics and offers some practical tips for navigating the digital world in a healthy way.
At the end of the day, we're all drawn to stories. It's part of what makes us human. But it's important to find ways to engage with them in a way that enriches our lives rather than diminishes them.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone.
It's been a pleasure.
Till next time.
See you then.